The poem we are going to read today is After Blenheim, written by Robert Southey, an English poet. He was a romantic poet basically, and romantic poets focus on their personal emotions, nature. Robert Southey was a romantic poet who was also a poet laureate of England from 1813 to 1843. The poem we will be focusing today is an anti-war poem. The poet focuses on the atrocities and devastation that war leaves behind. Through this poem, the poet wants us to think if war is necessary to resolve any dispute. The poet here refers to the Battle of Blenheim that occurred in 1704 in a village named Blenheim, which was in southern Germany. The battle was fought between English and French, and the English defeated the French. So let's get started with the poem. Stanza 1 says, "It was a summer evening. Old Caspar's work was done, and he, before his cottage door, was sitting in the sun, and by him sported on the green his little grandchild Wilhelmine." So, it is a summer evening, an evening in summer, when old Caspar was done with his work. He was a farmer. He was sitting outside his cottage to get the warmth of the setting sun. You know, summer days are long and the sun sets late in the evening. So, old Caspar was sitting to enjoy the setting sun. Now, in front of the cottage door, Caspar is sitting there and watching Wilhelmine playing in the green grass nearby. So the poem begins with a vivid picture of a summer evening where old Caspar is sitting and watching his grandchild playing. Stanza 2 says, "She saw her brother Peterkin roll something large and round, which he beside the rivulet in playing there had found. He came to ask what he had found that was so large and smooth and round." Now Wilhelmine sees that his brother Peterkin, who was also playing near the rivulet, means stream, he came rolling a thing in his hand which was large and smooth. Let's come to the third stanza. "That was so large and smooth and round, old Caspar took it from the boy, who stood expectant by. And then the old man shook his head, and with a natural sigh, 'It's some poor fellow's skull,' said he, 'who fell in the great victory.'" Caspar takes the thing in his hand. Caspar is an old man. He is naturally experienced person. Peterkin trusts his grandfather that he will definitely tell what the thing is. Now old Caspar takes it in his hand, and with a natural sigh, with a feeling of sadness, he says, "Oh, this is a poor fellow's skull. This is the skull of a poor fellow who was killed in the war." Now he mentions the war. He mentions the war by saying that it was a great victory. So he is defining the war as a great victory. Coming to the fourth stanza, "I find them in the garden, for there's many hereabout, and often when I go to plough, the ploughshare turns them out. For many thousand men," said he, "were slain in that great victory." Caspar very naturally defines the war as a great victory and says that it is a natural thing. The finding of the skull is very much natural to him. He often finds it while ploughing the field. The ploughshare turns it while tilting the soil. So, he says, for many thousand men were slain in that great victory. He knows that in the Battle of Blenheim, thousands of men, uncountable soldiers were killed, and their death solved the purpose of the victory. That is how he wants to define it. See, Caspar is a very common person. He does not dive deep into the cause of the war. He knows it was a great victory. That's what he heard people saying. So he also repeats the words that it was a great victory. The fifth stanza says, now tell us what it was all about. Young Peterkin, he cries, and little Wilhelmine looks up with wonder-waiting eyes. Now tell us all about the war and what they fought each other for. Young Peterkin cries means he screams to know the cause of the war, why the war was fought, because by heart he knows that war brings nothing than bloodshed, slaughter, means killing of young blossoming lives. So he also understands that there is no meaning of killing people, how a war can be a victorious thing where people only see bloodsheds and loss of lives. Peterkin wants to know all about the war, and Wilhelmine also looks up at Caspar with wonder in her eyes. She thought Caspar might be telling a wonderful story, but she does not know that she is going to listen to a horrible fact about war. When she hears about the fact, she asks why the war was fought, because she finds no reason to fight the war. See, the ability of questioning things is a peculiar habit of kids. So here also we are seeing that these two children are asking questions repeatedly about the war. The poet here reflects the zeal and curiosity of the young ages. Stanza 6 says, it was the English, Caspar cried, who put the French to rout, but what they fought each other for I could not well make out. But everybody said, quoth he, that it was a famous victory. Caspar says that the battle was fought between English and French, and we all know that English defeated the French. That is what I know, means Caspar knows all about the war, nothing more. He says, I do not well make out, because he does not well know why the war was fought. He only knows that it was a great victory. Being a common person, Caspar also does not want to find out the reason why the war was fought. Coming to the seventh stanza. My father lived at Blenheim then. Yon little stream hard by, they burnt his dwelling to the ground, and he was forced to fly. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head. Caspar now is telling his personal experience with the war. He says when he was a child, his father had to flee from the place where he lived with his child Caspar and wife. because the army or the government forced him to leave his place. Otherwise, he would have been killed. Moreover, his dwelling place, his residence was burnt, and he anyhow could save his own life along with his wife and little Caspar. But he did not know where to keep shelter, where to go. Only he had to leave his residential place. They had to roam from one place to another, having no shelter. Stanza 8. With fire and sword the country round was wasted far and wide, and many a childing mother then and newborn baby died. But things like that, must be at every famous victory. Fire and sword means killing and burning. Fire refers to burning and sword refers to killing. So many people, not only soldiers but the citizens also were killed in the war. Many pregnant women who were yet to give birth to their child were killed. In this particular stanza, the poet describes the devastation that war has left behind. He brings before our eyes the severity of the battle. But things like that, must be at every famous victory. Caspar wants to justify the war by saying that these killings are very trivial matter. These killings must happen when a great victory is brought. Stanza 9 says, they say it was a shocking sight after the field was won, for many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. But things like that, must be after a famous victory. Caspar keeps on saying that he heard people saying that it was a shocking sight after the field was won, after the battle was won. Because many bodies of the soldiers, many dead bodies of the soldiers were here and there lying about. They got no burial. They were only scattering here and there, unnoticed, uncared. The word rotting is emotive and a vivid word that shows that war not only takes away life but humanity and dignity also. Again, we see that Caspar is repeating the words a famous victory, a great victory, because he does not dive into the reason of the war. He only knows what other people know. He knows that it was a great victory. That's all. Now we are coming to the stanza 10. Great praise the Duke of Marlborough won, and our good Prince Eugene. Why, it was a very weak thing, said little Wilmine. Nay, nay, my little child, quoth he, it was a famous victory. The Duke of Marlborough and Prince Eugene, representing Britain, got much praise because they brought the victory. But little Wilhelmine says, how can a war be so victorious, so praiseworthy? There is nothing praiseworthy in a war. She says, why? It was a very weak thing. She thinks that it's a very weak thing it's very bad to kill people. So, war is meaningless to her. But though a little heart understands the futility of war, the aged persons do not know that. Caspar says, no, don't say this. It was a famous victory. The last stanza of the poem says, and everybody praised the Duke who this great fight did win. But what good came of it at last? Quoth little Peterkin. Why, that I cannot tell, said he, but it was a famous victory. Here also Caspar keeps on justifying the war. He says that everybody praised the Duke for bringing the victory. But what good came of it at last? Peterkin asks, what good did it do? But the old man has no satisfying answer to his question. He only keeps on saying, it was a great victory. See, this line is an epitome of irony. The repetition of the words here through the mouth of Peterkin, the poet asks, what was the reason behind fighting the war? The poet questions the very purpose and need of the war. The poet, through the poem, wants to give us a message that war is futile and it should be avoided. The poem we have studied has 11 equal stanzas bearing 6 lines each. The poet follows the rhyme scheme AB, CB, DD. Though the second stanza quite differs from this rhyme scheme. And the style used here is a conversation basically among 3 people, among Caspar, an old farmer, his grandchild Peterkin, and the other one is Wilhelmine. So learners, this was the poem all about. If you want any questions to be discussed, you can write me in the comment section. I will be there with another video. Till then, keep studying and stay happy.